Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Thanos Davelis, Director of Public Affairs at the Hellenic American Leadership Council and host of The Greek Current. And, it's great to be chatting about Greece and Greece's economy right now. Everything is always, at least on our end, geopolitics. But I think this is one of the stories that's really made headlines over the last years. Greece has been highlighted by outlets like The Economist as the choice country of the year. We've seen Bloomberg, we've seen Washington Post highlight Greece's debt reduction. We've seen investment interest from around the world, including the United States, really spike in the last years. And obviously this coincides with bilateral relations being at their highest point yet, according to many. So with that, I think we can skip the introductions and the bios of everybody and just dive in. You can see who's speaking up here. But Ambassador Tsounis, I want to kick off with you. During your tenure as ambassador, the Greek economic comeback hit new high after new high. As a leader of the Greek American community, you also played a key role in encouraging U.S. intervention during the height of the Greek economic crisis. What are 3 developments you never would have imagined in 2015 that are a reality in the Greek economy today in 2025?
Greek interest rates. Greek interest rates were at 35% on the 10-year. It's about 4%. Greece just did, a bond offering, short-term bond offering at just over 2% a couple of weeks ago. So consistently over the past half of year, maybe a year, Greek interest rates have probably stayed 60, 70 bips below U.S. interest rates. So when you have the markets are looking that Greece sovereign debt is a safer, better deal in terms of how they're pricing it than U.S. debt, that's a shock. The fact that it has been priced below, French, Spanish, and Italian debt is also a surprise. Greece has also gone from a place where you couldn't find a job. It hit the 28% unemployment rate. It's now 8.6% and dropping. It's gone to a place where you can't find an employee. The precipitous drop in the unemployment rate, has surprised me to the positive. And, overall, it's just a sentiment. It has become one of the hottest places to invest in from a real estate tourism point of view. Now, we've said 3 bullish things. I would also say that the underpinning of a strong, modern, 21st century vibrant economy is research, largely research coming out of educational institutions, and research to the point of monetizing it, building something and monetizing it. Greece has the single most important thing, and that is πανέξυπνοι σπουδασμένοι άνθρωποι. But we need to create an ecosystem. If not, I think it's sufficient to say that Greece has become the Florida of Europe, but I think it has the intellectual capability to become so much more. We just need to keep on driving a more an ecosystem that provides startup capital and an understanding coming out of universities that they need to sort of harness the intellectual capabilities into helping their graduates and their academic communities, drive technology and business growth going forward.
Mr. Hadzidikolaou, one of the big issues during the financial crisis was the stability of the banking sector, and stabilizing it was and remains a challenge. What were the main lessons learned from the crisis, and what kind of measures have Greece's banks adopted to insulate themselves from a future crisis?
First of all, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to be here in this distinguished panel. I would say, first and foremost, the crisis that Greece and the Greek banking system went through is an example of the importance of the political and economic stability. To see how this works in the US and other Western countries, the crisis emanated from the banking sector and then contaminated other things. In Greece, it was the reverse. It was basically a failure of the state, which basically the state went bankrupt, and in the process bankrupted the banking sector. But either way, there is another lesson to be learned, that the perils of excess borrowing, be that public, be that private. And conversely, the existence of very stable government environment that has prevailed, particularly since 2019, has allowed the banking sector to restore itself by taking some quite decisive steps. Number one, I think, which is critical, is the change in the corporate governance that took place in the Greek banks. We all know, and we may well speak about it, there was an incestuous relationship between politicians, certain parts of the corporate world, and the banking system, more or less going around. That stopped when there were significant changes at the top of the banking organizations, at the insistence of Troika, where we basically established proper corporate governance through independent boards. And the independent boards are there to protect the interests of the shareholders and, of course, the other stakeholders primarily, and not other things. And that has been instrumental in setting up the culture that has gone further down. As we know, and we say in Greece, to ψάρι βρωμάει από το κεφάλι. Fish stinks from the head. So that has been critical in order to change the culture. I would say to you also a second lesson is that be decisive to deal with the issue head on. And the Greek banking system, with the assistance of the state, tackled the number one issue of the banking system, which was the NPLs, the non-performing loans. We took significant haircuts. Unfortunately, shareholders suffered another round. It was tough pain, but for a significant gain, because we see now the results of that treatment. And the results have been what has emerged is a very healthy, liquid, and well-capitalized banking system that is in a position to supply the necessary funding for the growth of the Greek economy. And of course, it has learned from the past. The proper governance that exists now, the banks, and the sound credit and control policies that exist, I think, have endowed us well in the future because we have learned from the past.
Thank you. Mr. Dakolias, speaking, since we've covered, the previous crisis, let's look ahead to let's say there is a future crisis. This week may have indicated that this could be upon us. For America's finance industry and American investors, what makes Greece attractive or maybe even safer in this turbulent international economic environment?
One of the issues I think that is in front of us that I think is not obvious is as the U.S. becomes more distressed and as there are more opportunities in the U.S., countries like Greece for U.S. investors become more challenging to invest in because there are more opportunities for us back in the States. So while it is a safe country to invest in, a lot of opportunities here, I think one of the challenges about the U.S. and the crisis that's going on right now, which I don't think will be resolved in the near future, is that you'll see more American firms, more U.S. institutions at least, spending time investing more in the States, focusing their efforts, because it's obviously a much bigger market and there are more opportunities for them to invest across the capital structure and different assets in the U.S. than there are in Greece. That said, there are a lot of us that have European dedicated funds, so funds that are focused entirely on European investments. And Greece does stand out for all of us in Europe as a consistent place to do business right now with a stable government, stable regime. I disagree a little bit on the NPL side in Greece because it has, and going off topic here for a second, but
that's all right.
We talk about this all the time. The NPLs have left the Greek banking system, but they still exist. They haven't gone away. They just sit in our hands, they sit in other owners' hands. And so when you think about it, until that resolves itself in Greece, until you see the NPLs kind of go from whatever they are now, 70 billion down, 70 billion down, you still have a big part of the economy that doesn't have access to capital, that's still locked into the transactions that basically are remnants of the crisis. They've just left the banks. The banks now are liquid, they can provide capital, but all of these individuals, all these companies are unfinanceable because they have the NPLs and the banks can't actually refinance them. So, for Greece to really continue on its path, I think that transition has to occur also, or continue.
Mr. Hadzikolaou, I want to pull you into this discussion here on NPLs because I know you jumped in there.
Absolutely correct. The NPLs have left the banking system, but they are still with the Greek economy. And that's a major problem because, as Dean very correctly pointed out, it's trapped capital that keeps people hostages. It has been going on now for too long, and I do not see, frankly, a solution until we get to the end of the discussion when we're going to talk about the last question, and I will come back to that, okay? So hold your horses a little bit for the complete answer.
George, did you want to chime in?
For those that were not finance managers, NPLs are non-performing loans. And why is it important? Because Greece has difficulty rehabilitating a loan, the net that is this. You borrowed $10 million 10 years ago. You nursed your company back to health, and it could adequately support $6 million in debt. Unless you are able to rehabilitate your loan, you've sold it, you've settled it, you've refinanced it for $6 million. The person who bought the NPL is happy. Now you are able as a company to go out and buy other things, build other things, develop, employ, and get access to additional credit. So in Greece, if you have outstanding debt from an institution and you haven't rehabilitated it, you have a lot of difficulty accessing other credit, and it's holding back Greek entrepreneurs and the Greek corporate entities from really growing and expanding, and that's why it's really important.
Mr. Piraeus, I want to turn to you because we often hear about the Greek economy's success stories, which are primarily in tourism a lot. At least that's what we see in the headlines. But one of the common critiques is that the Greek economy is not diversified enough. You led the creation of an entirely new industry in Chicago when you established Cinespace Studios, which you also used to help Greece become a more attractive destination for Hollywood. Can you tell us how you helped transform the economy of Chicago and why that's a model for doing something similar in Greece?
Yeah. So Chicago, when we opened up Cinespace in 2009, it was definitely the time of the real estate bubble. Things were terrible in Chicago. There was not many jobs. There was not revenue. It was just a bad time. And so with Cinespace, what we were able to do is create 20,000 jobs. We ended up putting in about $2 billion worth of revenue for the city and state of Chicago and Illinois. And education was a big part of it. How do we do that? A lot of people believe that the film industry is red carpet and it's directors and it's actors, and that's completely not what it is. It's actually a blue-collar business. Mm-hmm. You don't need a college education.
I've been to Cinespace Studios and I've seen that, so yeah.
Yeah. So you don't need a college education to work at Cinespace. So out of 20,000 employees, maybe 10% had a college education, right? So what better tool to have coming out of a crisis? And along with that, you're also able to partner with colleges for the ones that want to go to film school, the ones that want to be a director, the ones that want to learn how to edit films and write scripts. With Greece, it was kind of, the timing was incredible. When I brought about 15 studio executives, all top executives from LA, here for a fam tour, Greece was just getting out of their issues, right? And they listened to these studio executives, and they did a great job showing them Greece, showing them the possibilities of Greece, showing them that Greece did have a good labor group, good universities. And since that tour, filming in Greece, and I think you're right, it's not talked about enough. Usually from the States, when you hear Greece, it's all tourism. That's all you hear about, But the film industry has done a great job here. I still stay in contact with all the studio executives that I brought here at that time, and they couldn't be happier with the service, with the tax incentive, with the labor force, and again, the key is always it's blue collar jobs, and any state, any country, any city always can use those jobs, especially when you're coming out of such a traumatic economy that we were coming out of then in 2009, and Greece was coming out of when we started here.
Yeah. Mr. Sarakakis, speaking of diversity in the economy, you had a company that's involved in multiple sectors. Which sector of the Greek economy do you see the most significant upside?
Before answering to that, I would like to describe a bit my view on the future of the economy.
Sure.
We have been going through a tremendous recession that lasted almost 10 years. and then we followed a quite successful recovery phase. Now again, we are in a turning point where we need to go to the next step, which is the growth phase. The lessons learned from that recessions and what got us there maybe were not fully understood, but so the challenge now is to, even if that was not enough, to realize that the global change and the shifts that are happening, those make us address with urgency, what we need to, how we need to restructure our economy. So innovation must be for sure a theme, a pillar of that, with the new technological revolution in the air, but also sustainability in mind. And by sustainability, I don't just mean the environment, but also financial sustainability. So our investments must be long-term and look into the future. So our growth model, and as we know it, must take all that into consideration. I think we need to implement, like I just said, innovation and the new technologies. We have to have an eye on exports. The local market is good as it is, but we have to expand. We need to attract, of course, foreign investments, which is also the theme of this panel. And we need to be able to be resilient, but also flexible, because changes happen very fast. And we must not forget, of course, social cohesion in anything we do. Greece, because you asked about sectors, Greece traditionally is a service economy. So we need to upgrade the service economy into more knowledge-intensive sectors. Ambassador, you mentioned some of them. And of course, we need to increase manufacturing. We're very low at that. And we must be able to add value to whatever we produce, not sell low-value products, whether it's services or manufacturing. And one obvious step in that is the new technological revolution and businesses that are in that sector, which require relatively minimal, less investment as opposed to high manufacturing. And it also takes advantage of the very skilled and good people we have here that can be, work in that. And yes, I would like to see this economy, like I said, change from the recovery mode, aim high, and go into a growth mode.
Ambassador, I want to throw the diversification question to you. We saw the U.S. get involved in incentivizing shipyards and energy projects during your tenure. There was also the discussion of deeper defense ties, which would include Greek manufacturing. What opportunities for diversification of the Greek economy and especially promising, for U.S.-Greece bilateral relations and for Greece's geostrategic significance?
Look, I think a lot of it, and my predecessor, Ambassador Pyatt, who just left as the Assistant Secretary of Energy, will tell you, and he knows better than me, a lot of the U.S.-Greek relationship is based on energy. So Greece has sort of reinvented the energy map in the region. They're a top 10 country in renewables. So not only is it about decarbonization, but energy transition and diversification. Mm-hmm. Greece can be the outlet that gets Gazprom off of Europe's neck. We need to provide an alternative for Europe. And, this could be U.S. LNG coming in through Revithousa or Alexandroupoli through a pipeline or an electrical interconnector. Because, nowadays, we can take a renewable and take it through an electrical interconnector and connect through Europe. This is not only an important economic tool, it's an important, geostrategic tool. You're not going to have manufacturing in a place that you have the highest electricity rates in the world. So unless, Greece is becoming a data storage hub, a data center hub. So if you're not able to provide the juice and provide the cooling mechanism, that's going to be problematic. So finishing up the infrastructure, higher tension lines to Italy, and certainly you need storage capacity, which is critically important. I look at it as connectivity. So whether it's NATO logistics connectivity coming through Alexandroupoli, commercial connectivity, as you know, if IMEC is going to be real, and if you have goods coming through the Suez Canal, the first country and the first ports are in Europe or in Greece. You can put them on rail, you can put them in a truck, and you can take them throughout Europe and the EU, and Europe is a huge market. So Greece can be a commercial logistics hub, data centers, energy, and you know, there's a lot of opportunities, but the underpinnings of a strong economy are EDs and MEDs. So they have to develop serious research. That research has to have an eye to monetization. We need to incubate it. There needs to be a sense of innovation, startup capital. And this is a European issue where, and the Draghi report, you know, articulates this very, very well. Europe needs to start building things again. So those are things that are opportunistic. Now, if you want you know, a very small return, you know, go to Switzerland. But I think there's outside profits and opportunities to be had in Greece because, you know, they may be at the fourth inning of their technological revolution. The amount of progress that has been made over the last decade, you know, has been articulated in, you know, as Larry Summers said, not only the economy of the year, the economy of the decade. But there is only so much change that any economy or can take, you know, at a certain point in time. There's a lot of upside in the Greek economy because, you know, it still has not fully reformed itself. It's in that process, and they're making a lot of progress. I'm happy to see that the banking system is on very solid ground. The Moody's and the Fitches of the world are attributing to that. But, you know, when you had S&P and Fitch, you know, give them investment grade, that unleashed probably 5 to 10 billion that would come in from the Vanguards and the Dreyfuses and the BlackRocks of the world. Moody's probably doubled that. You could have as much as 20 billion went into the bonds of Greek banks, Greek sovereign debt, and such. And as the Greek Athens Stock Exchange is about 102 billion euros in market cap, actually before last week, I don't know what it is now. You know, and the other thing that I would say, and this is the opportunity, I served as an independent director of a $150 billion bank before I became ambassador. I sat on the loan committee, I approved $2 billion loans. I know a little bit about this business. You know, our banks in the US, and I worked in the Senate Banking Committee when I got out of law school, maybe 90% of loans to deposits. In Greece, maybe it's 60-ish? 65%. That extra 25% on 210 billion euros, you know, that's over 50 billion euros that can be unleashed in loans if banks can provide, can find qualified borrowers. And that's where the opportunity lies. They're finding them in tourism, they're finding them in real estate, they're finding them in some food commodities, and they're finding them in shipping. But what we really need to see is, you know, research, innovation, to really create, whether it's, you know, Silicon Valley or whether it's Herzliya. Greece has that capability. We just need to finish building out this ecosystem.
Well, Mr. Hadzikolaou, I want to turn to you then. You know, have we witnessed loan demand pick up in Greece in either new economic sectors or in underdeveloped geographic areas? You know, is there anything about loan demand in Greece that might suggest, one, that diversification is underway, and two, that this money could start trickling into the economy and provide that boost that the ambassador outlined?
Well, as George mentioned, and I indicated also, as part of the cleanup exercise of the Greek banking system, the Greek banking system has found itself to have excess liquidity when, as George pointed out, the Greek banking system has a 65% ratio of loans to deposits. That indicates that the system is very liquid. Add to that the system is very well capitalized, one of the highest capital ratios in Europe, then you have a banking system that is ready and willing to lend. It has the money, it has the capital to do so. But it takes two to tango. In order to lend money, that means somebody has to come in and ask for loans, which basically, the question here is not the capacity of the system to supply liquidity. It's the capacity of the system to generate new investments, and which goes straight to the question you are asking, which is how basically do we grow the economy, which is a hotly debated topic. It has been a hotly debated topic for the past 60 years in Greece. How do we grow? But what we are now seeing is an economy that is really heavily leaning on tourism. And it is also the foreign direct investment that is coming in, where basically last year we got about 6 billion of FDI, out of which half of it went, 50% went to real estate, and another 15% went to the stock market. So a small portion of that went to the real investments, I would call, and, in the form of data centers, some of them went to logistics, some of them went to energy, as George pointed out. But we need much more of that. Why? Because over the period of the crisis, the past 10 years, where there was underinvestment, now people estimate that we have a deficit of about an investment gap, if I can call it this way, of over 100 billion. To basically fill this investment gap, we need much higher amounts of investment, both domestic, financed both domestically and internationally. And also, in order to have a balanced growth, you need to have it not all happening in Athens and Thessalonica, you need to see it happening in the periphery as well of Greece. And this is basically work in progress. And we will touch upon it in your last question as to what stops it. But in general, capital, global capital, which is circling the world, there's plenty of around these days, is looking at risk-return opportunities. I think it's fair to say that returns in Greece are attractive. So therefore, the question has to be on the risk side. And on the risk side, what I would say is there are factors where unless business people can quantify, they act as impediments to investment. Because a manager and an investor who really looks to make an investment, he needs to lay out the cash flows, take into account the risks, see how he will deal with the risks, make some slack for the risks through the sensitivity, and then it's a go or not go based on what he sees as an outcome. If there are things over there which he cannot quantify, then he stops. So let's talk about what stops them, and we'll talk at the end of your last question.
Mr. Dakolia, since I gave everyone a crack at the diversification question, I want to pose it to you as well. What do large institutional investors want to see in terms of a diversified economy here in Greece before they become fully bullish on Greece instead of just looking for, buy low opportunities?
I agree with George on many fronts, but I'm going to focus on one thing, and it's really not just a Greek issue. George and I were having a conversation earlier today. In 1941, the U.S. government turned to Berkeley, Chicago, and Columbia primarily, along with others, to do research to fund how to win the war. In 1949, Truman basically cemented that and provided funding to all these institutions in the U.S. on a recurring basis. That's under assault in the U.S. right now. Funding in the U.S. to universities. A lot of that goes to professors and researchers who are not Americans, who are foreigners, whose ability to function in the U.S. is challenged right now. Greece, the Europeans have a moment in time opportunity, to me, in my view, to try to recapture some of that research, to really try to bring back to Europe and to Greece. You go up and down from Baltimore to Boston, and you stop in every biotech business in the region, and it's populated with either Greek Americans or Greeks from here, right? I mean, Roy Vagelos is the grandfather of the biotech industry in the U.S. There's a lot of talent here, a lot of very educated, very smart people who go off and do their work around the world. And given the trajectory, I think, in the U.S. on how research is being funded, how it might be funded going forward, there is a moment in time to kind of bring that back to Europe, invigorate that, get that back into universities, and then benefit from the work that comes out of it. You know, all the research that drives companies, that drives tech, that drives entrepreneurship, you know, take advantage of that. You have groups in Greece like Endeavor now, who are I think are you know, been here 10 years, who I think have created a great ecosystem. You really need to expand that. It needs to be, I think, the focus for Greece. I agree with George. I don't think manufacturing is going to be the driver of real growth. I think it can be an energy hub. It can be a hub for trade with the Middle East, with Asia, with the subcontinent, and in terms of India. So I think there can be connectivity for Greece for a lot of the world as entry point into Europe. But I do think the real opportunity for Greece is to create the tech, the ecosystem around entrepreneurship, because the talent here, the talent of the diaspora that might want to come back is significant.
Alex, you've already cast a vote of confidence by investing heavily in Greece. But what do you still need to see to be able to convince, for example, your co-investors in US funds to bet on Greece?
Predictability. You know, Greece is still a great unknown. There's still some reputational obstacles, like legal reform, budgetary discipline, political stability. Making sure that these are givens and not question marks, I think that's really number one. You know, it all makes a difference, and it makes people like myself and other investors motivated to want to come to Greece. I mean, I have motivation for other reasons, you know, family, and this is where my family's from, and you know, success worked well for the family in the United States and in Canada, and now you know, we really want to do something in Greece to keep investing. And Greece definitely, you know, has to do a better job. I kind of said it before, in addressing their success stories. You know, because you know, you hear it from, at least in the States, you know, you'll hear about every tourism story and you know, every hotel that's going up, but that's all you hear coming from the States. You know, and I think there's so much more success stories in Greece, and I've been spending more and more time here, and I just think they need to get those great stories out there because there's so many great stories.
Is there a story in particular that you think we should know about?
The film industry. I mean, you know, that's one that, you know, you're talking about. I mean, that incentive, it has to be 6-7 years ago, and you know, you still don't hear about it. You know, and and if you do the research, there's more films shot out in Europe right now, in Greece, more than any other country in Europe, but you don't hear about that. You know, and again, I think it's getting the stories out, more of these great stories.
John, you're running to head the American Hellenic Chamber of Commerce. What's one change to that institution that you believe would help draw more foreign investors to Greece and to link them up with trusted local partners? Because that's also an important issue for foreign investors.
Well, starting in 2018, we see a steady improvement of the Greek-US relations. And that has led, of course, to the significant investments in the country, and that's thanks to the efforts of the government, the efforts of the embassies, and of course, our chamber has to take some credit for that also. And so all that has led to this improvement of the investments that followed also the improvement of the Greek economy. Now our chamber must take it again a step further, and in two fronts. Like George said, we have a gap in investments, and that includes both foreign direct investments and also domestic investments. So one source of the foreign investments must be the US because of this good climate. But in order to do that, we must first convince the investors, and we must not just rely, with all due respect, to the Greek-American investments that have an extra motive, they have a sentimental motive, but we must make it attractive for corporate America. So our mission as a chamber is to convince corporate America that we are investment worthy, that they can have the good returns, they can in the new sectors we mentioned before. So building bridges with the corporate America is very important. To do that, as a country, we must change our image. And of course, we're not government agencies to change what's needed. But as a business community, we must unite, form strong alliances, work together, work with all the business associations to try to together show all the benefits that Greece has, and work together, and each one from their own side try to improve the climate in Greece. So I think that's something that we can do successfully.
So we have about 6 minutes left, and I think this last question is going to be a lightning round. We've alluded to what the question is going to be early on, but if we can keep it within about a minute of an answer, I think that'll get us right on time. But what's one, and hopefully each of you can give me a different one here, what's one reform that either the Greek government or the Greek private sector can undertake to draw greater foreign investment? George, we'll start with you and move down the line.
You know, as a diplomat, you don't want to say anything that is even approaching being critical of anybody. As my diplomatic days are over, I'm going to say something with the intent of being highly critical. The judicial system here is a joke. It's a joke. And I'm going to give you two very poignant examples. I'm going to save the best for last. I have a very close friend of mine. He's the CEO of a major global company. The war in Ukraine breaks out. He happens to 2 acquisitions, have 400 employees in St. Petersburg. He has to get out. I said, come to Thessaloniki. I'll find you office space, you know, schools for the kids, so on and so forth, no matter what. And most of them are of Russian origin. We're moving everyone to Poland. I said, you want to bring 400 Russians to Poland? I said, why wouldn't you bring them to Greece? I'll have everything red carpet for you. George, I'm a fiduciary. I'm a CEO of a public company. I'm a fiduciary. There's no way that I can capital allocate to a country where if I go to court, maybe I'll get a decision in 10 years. And I can give you 100 examples. Now, Rich Daley, who was the CEO of Broadridge, number 11 in total shareholder return from 2010 to 2020, had been to Greece once in his life to go to a wedding in Mykonos. How do you know this? He goes, what do you think? We CEOs are stupid, we don't talk to each other? It's well known that the judicial system doesn't work in Greece. The second thing, and I will tell you that really irks me, is some of the legislation, the slap suits, that if someone sexually assaults someone in Greece and has the temerity to file a police report, the person who's accused of sexual assault can also file a police report, and the woman who is sexually assaulted might spend the day in jail. So as ambassador, we had to deal with some of those issues. We also cooperated with the Hellenic police to break up a house of ill repute. Whether women were promised modeling contracts in Europe, they would Moldova, Georgia, Ukraine. Later on, it was Venezuela, Colombia, and their passports are seized. They're thrown into a room, and I don't need to get into details. So we cooperate with the Hellenic police. We have a very major presence here in terms of FBI, DEA, Homeland Security, and we have an excellent relationship with the Hellenic police. So 20 people are arrested. 30 women are freed. Not one of those people spends a day in jail. You know what? A lot of us are parents, and it's unacceptable. I am going to be harshly critical, not of government, because I have met with the Minister of Justice and we have discussed this, and he's introducing legislation, and they're doing all the right things. But, you know, we need to have prosecutors and judges that understand that justice delayed is justice denied, and we should be a little bit more victim-centric in our judicial system.
Well, I will fully concur with George on this issue. I will generalize a little bit, though. We need radical reform of the public administration, and with focus, number one, of the judicial system, which George ably described. But I will also mention the NPE, the NPL problem. A big part of its non-resolution relies with the judicial system. I mean, in the American system, which I was educated and didn't know very well, all of you know very well, within 2 years, the bankruptcy process completes. Basically, trapped capital is allocated, and then people involved are allowed to continue with their lives. This continues to be a problem here, so this is a major impediment. The second major impediment, and I will conclude here, is the reform of the urban and suburban planning process and the land registry, which creates enormous uncertainty about property rights, which puts a lot of problems for anybody who wants to come and invest, because if you cannot secure the piece of land which you're going to build upon, how you can proceed? But broadly speaking, dysfunctionalities in the public administration create the uncertainty I was referring to when you go to investment process. You will plan basically everything, but if you're going to wait, you don't know how long to get a license, or to get a license from the archaeological service, or this, or from the τοπική πολεοδομία, etc., that is an unknown which you cannot quantify and acts as an impediment for an investment.
Mr. Golias?
The courts are obviously number one, and everything else pales in comparison. So, but if I had to pick something different, and I won't try to be subtle with this, but I think not my strong suit.
Really?
The friction in transactions, and just some of the difficulty of actually doing business and getting transactions done in Greece, particularly with the government, I think can be challenging and difficult to navigate.
Alex?
Establish a better economic presence where corporate America is making its decisions. I mean, very similar to what everyone seems to say. If you want corporate America to come to Greece and kind of exactly what you said, you got to make it friendly, and they got to know that they're coming here and it's going to be supportive, you know what I mean? And you can't let government control a company that's going to come in and want to invest and put those types of millions and millions of dollars into your country.
John, I know our time is up.
Time is blinking,
so we're going to have to institute an NBA shot clock.
I'll just say it in one word, literally. Vision. Vision. We lack the vision. Let's have the vision, the ambition to turn around the country, the business environment, and make it business friendly. Without investment, we cannot grow. So we need investment. Let's make it easy for the investors.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.